Picture this: August 18th, 1945. A plane takes off from Taipei, Taiwan. On board is one of the most wanted men in Asia, a revolutionary who'd spent 4 years building an army to overthrow the British Empire. Hours later, the plane crashes. The man dies. His body is cremated immediately. At least, that's the official story. But no one ever saw the body. No photographs exist. And for the next 80 years, the Indian government would refuse to declassify thousands of pages about what really happened to him. His name was Subhas Chandra Bose, and today, right now, as you're listening to this, there are people in India who believe he's still alive. Not metaphorically, literally alive. Textbooks call him Netaji, the respected leader. Statues of him stand in every major Indian city. His birthday is a national holiday. Children memorize his speeches. Politicians invoke his name to win elections. But those same textbooks barely mention that he met with Hitler, that he formed an army with Japanese support, that he broadcast propaganda encouraging Indians to support the Axis powers, that when World War II ended, the British wanted to try him for treason. So here's the question. Can you be both your country's greatest hero and someone who collaborated with the Nazis? India has spent 8 decades trying to answer that question, and they still haven't released the files. This is Lines Across Asia, and this is the story of a man who travelled from India to Afghanistan, to Russia, to Germany, to Japan, to Singapore, to Burma, drawing lines across the entire continent, trying to free his country by allying with its enemies. The question is, did it make him a hero or something else entirely? Who was Subhas Chandra Bose? Let's start in 1897, Cuttack, India. British colonial rule. Subhas Chandra Bose is born into a wealthy Bengali family. His father is a lawyer. His mother is deeply religious. They have 14 children. Subhas is brilliant, top of his class, Cambridge material, destined for the Indian civil service. That was the path, you understand. If you were smart and Indian and wealthy enough, you took the British exams, joined the bureaucracy, administered India on behalf of the empire. Comfortable life, good pension, don't ask questions. Bose took the exam in 1920. He ranked 4th in all of India. 4th, out of thousands. And then he quit. Just walked away. Said he wouldn't serve an empire that ruled through violence. This was the decision that defined everything that came after. Because in that moment, Bose chose resistance over comfort. And he would never stop resisting. Not for the next 25 years. Not until the day he either died or vanished, depending on who you ask. Now, you can't understand Bose without understanding his relationship with Mohandas Gandhi. Gandhi is the name everyone knows. Non-violence, civil disobedience, salt marches, the moral force that shamed an empire into leaving. Bose respected Gandhi, even loved him in a way, but he didn't agree with him. Gandhi's philosophy, non-violence is not just a tactic, it's a moral absolute. Even if the British beat you, jail you, kill you, you do not fight back with violence. The purity of your cause is more important than victory. Bose's philosophy, violence is a tool. If your country is being oppressed through violence, you respond with violence. Morality is luxury. Freedom is necessity. In 1928, Bose wrote, "India's enemy is not the British people. India's enemy is British imperialism. And imperialism only understands one language, force." Gandhi said, "An eye for an eye makes the whole world blind." Bose said, "Then we'll all be blind together, but we'll be free." 2 men, same goal, completely incompatible methods. By 1939, this wasn't just philosophical disagreement. It was political war. Bose got elected president of the Indian National Congress. Gandhi opposed him. Bose won anyway. Gandhi's supporters refused to work with him. Bose resigned in frustration. And here's what people don't talk about. Bose was probably right that non-violence alone wouldn't work. The British left India in 1947 not just because of Gandhi's moral authority, but because World War II had bankrupted them, because Bose's army had made them nervous, because holding India was no longer worth the cost. But Gandhi was also right that violence corrupts, that fighting monsters can turn you into one. Bose chose effectiveness over purity, and it led him to Berlin. Here's where the story becomes almost unbelievable. January 1941, British India. Bose is under house arrest in Calcutta. They know he's dangerous. They're watching him 24/7. He's planning something. They're sure of it. They just don't know what. What they don't know, Bose is planning the greatest escape in Indian history. January 16th, 1941, 11 p.m. Bose walks out of his house disguised as a Muslim insurance agent. His nephew waits outside with a car. They drive through the night to the train station. Bose boards a train heading northwest. The British realise he's gone by morning, but he's already in Bihar, then Punjab, then the northwest frontier. He crosses into Afghanistan on foot, through mountain passes, in winter, 48 years old. From Afghanistan, he goes to Moscow. The Soviets don't want him, too much trouble with their British allies, so they put him on a train to Berlin. Think about that journey. Calcutta to Bihar, to Punjab, to Afghanistan, to Russia, to Germany. Thousands of miles, multiple countries, multiple identities, all while being hunted by British intelligence. April 1941. Bose arrives in Berlin, and that's where the story gets complicated. Berlin, 1941. Meeting the Devil. So let's talk about what Bose did in Germany, because this is the part Indian textbooks gloss over. Subhas Chandra Bose met with Adolf Hitler. Not once, multiple times. He met with Heinrich Himmler, head of the SS. He met with Joachim von Ribbentrop, Hitler's foreign minister. He lived in Berlin for 2 years, 1941 to 1943, while the Holocaust was happening. While Germany was invading the Soviet Union, while the Nazi regime was at the peak of its power, and he asked them for help overthrowing British India. Now, before you make a judgment, let me give you Bose's logic, because he explained it clearly, many times. Britain is India's oppressor. Germany is fighting Britain. Therefore, Germany is India's ally. He called it Realpolitik, enemy of my enemy. This wasn't about ideology. He didn't care about Nazism or fascism or any of that. This was pure calculation. He needed weapons, training, money. Germany could provide them. That's all that mattered. In his own words, "We are not concerned with the internal politics of Germany. We are concerned only with securing India's freedom by any means necessary." Any means necessary. That phrase should make you uncomfortable, because any means necessary is how people justify almost anything. Here's what Bose actually did with German support. He formed the Indian Legion, about 3,000 soldiers recruited from Indian prisoners of war captured by the Germans in North Africa. These were soldiers who'd been fighting for Britain, got captured, and Bose convinced them to switch sides. The Legion wore German uniforms with Indian insignia. They trained with German weapons. They swore an oath to fight for Indian independence. And they did. Almost nothing. The Germans never really used them in combat. The Legion spent most of the war doing ceremonial duties, guard duty, propaganda work. It was symbolic, not strategic. Hitler met with Bose in May 1942. The meeting lasted an hour. Hitler was polite but uninterested. Germany had no real plans for India. They were too busy losing in Russia. Bose realised this by 1943. Germany wasn't going to help him. They didn't care about Indian independence. They were using him for propaganda. Look, even Indians oppose British imperialism, but they weren't going to actually do anything. So Bose made another calculation. If Germany won't help me, maybe Japan will. February 1943. Bose boards a German submarine in the North Atlantic. Destination, Southeast Asia. 3 months, underwater, crossing the Atlantic, rounding the Cape of Good Hope, entering the Indian Ocean. In 1943, this journey was incredibly dangerous. Allied forces controlled most of the seas. German U-boats were being sunk weekly. But Bose made it. He transferred to a Japanese submarine off Madagascar, continued to Sumatra, then Singapore. May 1943. Bose arrives in Singapore. And this is where the story changes. Because unlike the Germans, the Japanese actually wanted to use him. The Indian National Army, the INA, already existed when Bose arrived. It had been formed by captured Indian soldiers in Malaya and Singapore after Japan conquered those territories in 1942. About 40,000 men. But it was disorganized, poorly led, no clear mission. Bose took command in July 1943, and he transformed it. He renamed it the Azad Hind Fauj, the Free India Army. He gave it structure, hierarchy, purpose. He recruited women, forming the Rani of Jhansi Regiment, one of the first all-female combat units in Asian history. He established a provisional government, the Azad Hind, with himself as head of state. He declared war on Britain, not as a terrorist, not as a rebel, as the leader of a government in exile, commanding an army. And then he gave one of the most famous speeches in Indian history. "Give me blood, and I will give you freedom." That line is still quoted. Right now, today, in 2026, Indian politicians quote that line at rallies. It's on posters, in textbooks. Students memorize it. "Give me blood, and I will give you freedom." But here's what those textbooks don't include. Bose gave that speech in Singapore in 1943, surrounded by Japanese military officials, funded by the Japanese Empire, which was at that moment committing atrocities across Asia. The rape of Nanking, the Burma-Siam Railway, comfort women, mass executions. Bose knew this. He wasn't naive. He'd seen Japanese occupied territories. He knew what they did. And he decided it didn't matter. All that mattered was using Japanese power to attack the British in India. Enemy of my enemy. March 1944. The Indian National Army, alongside Japanese forces, invades India from Burma. The target? Imphal, a strategic city in northeastern India. This was Bose's moment. The INA was finally fighting on Indian soil. Bose believed, genuinely believed, that once Indian villages saw Indian soldiers fighting the British, there would be a mass uprising. Indians would join them. The British Indian Army would defect. India would rise. It didn't happen. The Imphal Campaign was a disaster. The Japanese INA force was outnumbered, undersupplied, fighting in monsoon conditions. The British Indian Army didn't defect. They fought harder. Villages didn't rise. They were caught in the crossfire. The INA suffered massive casualties. Thousands died. Thousands more were captured. The survivors retreated back to Burma. Bose had gambled everything on this invasion. He believed that the moral force of Indians fighting for freedom would overcome British military superiority. He was wrong. But here's the thing. Even though the INA lost, even though the invasion failed, the campaign changed everything. Because it proved that Indian soldiers would fight against the British if given the option. It showed that Indian loyalty to the empire wasn't automatic. It made the British realize that holding India might cost more than it was worth. The Imphal campaign failed militarily, but it succeeded psychologically. And that's what Bose understood that Gandhi didn't. Sometimes the effect of violence matters more than the outcome of violence. August 15th, 1945. Japan surrenders. World War II is over. The Axis has lost. Subhas Chandra Bose is in Saigon, Vietnam. He's technically a war criminal. He fought for the Axis. He commanded an army against the Allies. If the British capture him, they'll put him on trial, probably execute him. He decides to flee to the Soviet Union. The Soviets are nominally allied with Britain, but they're also rivals. Maybe they'll give him asylum. Maybe he can start over. August 18th, 1945. Bose boards a plane in Taipei, Taiwan. The plane is supposed to fly to Manchuria, then into Soviet territory. Hours later, the plane crashes. Bose dies. His body is burned. His remains are taken to a temple in Japan. That's the official story, according to the Japanese government and some eyewitnesses. But here's the problem. No one ever saw the body before cremation. No photographs exist. The witnesses gave contradictory accounts. The plane crash site was never properly investigated. The ashes in Japan have never been DNA tested. And in the decades since, there have been hundreds of reported sightings of Bose. In Russia, in China, in India. Some claimed he became a wandering holy man in India, hiding in plain sight. Some claimed he lived in a Soviet gulag for decades. Some claimed he was interrogated by Stalin, then imprisoned, then forgotten. The Indian government has launched 3 official investigations into Bose's death. 3. And each one concluded the same thing. We don't know for sure. The classified files. What is India hiding? Here's where the story becomes less about Bose and more about why India won't tell the truth. When India gained independence in 1947, the new government inherited British intelligence files on Bose. Thousands of pages, surveillance reports, interrogations, diplomatic cables. Those files were classified, top secret, not for public release. In 1970, Bose's family asked to see them. The government said no. In 1997, on the 100th anniversary of Bose's birth, activists demanded the files be released. The government said no. In 2015, the Indian government partially declassified some files, but huge sections were redacted, and the most sensitive files, the ones from 1945 to 1947, remained secret. In 2016, the government released a few more, still heavily redacted. As of 2026, right now, as you're listening to this, those files are still classified, more than 80 years after Bose's disappearance. Why? What is in those files that the Indian government doesn't want its citizens to know? There are theories. Theory 1. The files prove Bose didn't die in 1945. He was captured by the Soviets, imprisoned, and the Indian government knew about it but did nothing to rescue him. Theory 2. The files prove Bose did die in 1945, but in a way that's embarrassing. Maybe he was assassinated by the British, and independent India didn't want to acknowledge that they inherited a state built on the murder of their hero. Theory 3. The files contain evidence of Bose's full collaboration with the Axis, war crimes, orders to execute prisoners, atrocities committed by the INA, things that would destroy his hero status. Theory 4. The files prove Bose had secret negotiations with the British after the war, that he was willing to betray his allies, switch sides again, whatever it took to survive, and independent India didn't want to admit their hero was a pragmatic opportunist. We don't know, because the government won't tell us. And that's the question. Who owns history? The government or the people? When a government classifies files for 80 years, are they protecting national security, or are they protecting their own narrative? Because here's the thing, whether Bose died in 1945 or 1985, whether he was a hero or a war criminal, whether he betrayed everyone or stayed true to his cause, none of that changes what he did. None of that changes the choices he made. But it changes how we remember him. And India's government has decided that they get to control that memory. The politics of memory. Here's what makes this even more complicated. Bose's legacy is a political weapon in modern India. Right-wing Hindu nationalists love Bose. He's their ideal, militant, uncompromising, willing to use violence for the nation. They invoke him to justify aggressive nationalism, military expansion, hardline policies. Left-wing activists also love Bose. He's their ideal, anti-imperialist, revolutionary, willing to fight power. They invoke him to criticize the government, demand justice, challenge authority. Gandhi's heirs don't love Bose. He represents everything Gandhi opposed: violence, pragmatism, ends justify means. But they can't openly criticize him because he's too popular. So everyone claims Bose. Everyone says he would have supported their side, and no one knows for sure because the government won't release the files. It's brilliant in a cynical way. By keeping the truth hidden, the government allows Bose to be whatever people need him to be. He's a mirror. Everyone sees their own values reflected in him. It's brilliant in a cynical way. By keeping the truth hidden, the government allows Bose to be whatever people need him to be. He's a mirror. Everyone sees their own values reflected in him. And maybe that's the real reason the files stay classified. Not because they contain explosive secrets, but because the ambiguity is more useful than the truth. The question India can't answer. So let's address it directly. Was Subhas Chandra Bose a hero or a traitor? The argument for hero is obvious. He dedicated his entire life to freeing India. He sacrificed comfort, safety, family, everything. He built an army when Gandhi was building moral arguments. He fought when others talked. And whether his methods worked or not, his intent was pure. He wanted India free. The argument for traitor is also obvious. He allied with the Nazis. He allied with Imperial Japan. He asked genocidal regimes for help overthrowing British colonialism. He put Indian soldiers under Japanese command, knowing what Japan was doing to civilians across Asia. He prioritized Indian freedom above every other moral consideration. But here's the problem with both labels. They assume morality is simple. Hero means your cause is just, therefore your methods are justified. Traitor means your methods are evil, therefore your cause is tainted. But what if the cause is just and the methods are evil? What then? The uncomfortable truth about freedom struggles. Every successful freedom movement involves violence. Every one. American Revolution, French Revolution, Haitian Revolution, Chinese Revolution, Algerian independence, Kenyan independence, Indian independence. Yes, even Gandhi's movement resulted in massive violence during partition. The question is never, should violence be used? The question is, how much violence, against whom, and is it worth it? Bose said, whatever it takes, ally with anyone, do anything, just free India. Gandhi said, only non-violence, never ally with evil. The purity of the struggle matters more than the speed of victory. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Both men were right, and both were wrong. Gandhi was right that violence corrupts, that the methods you use to achieve freedom shape the kind of freedom you get. India's independence movement was globally admired because it was largely non-violent. That moral high ground mattered. Gandhi was right that violence corrupts, that the methods you use to achieve freedom shape the kind of freedom you get. India's independence movement was globally admired because it was largely non-violent. That moral high ground mattered. But Bose was right that non-violence alone wouldn't have worked. The British left India because they were broke, exhausted, and worried about another rebellion. Bose's INA didn't defeat the British militarily, but it scared them. It showed them that Indian soldiers would fight, that the cost of holding India was too high. So who was right? The answer is, we don't get to know, because history doesn't run experiments. We can't rewind and see what would have happened if Bose had died in 1941, or if Gandhi had supported the INA, or if Britain had decided to fight harder to keep India. We only know what happened, and what happened is, India got free in 1947, 2 years after Bose disappeared, 2 years after the INA trials, where the British put INA officers on trial, and Indian public opinion turned so sharply against the trials that the British realized they couldn't hold India anymore. Cause and effect? Maybe. Correlation? Definitely. Did Bose's collaboration with the Axis help free India? Maybe. Does that make it okay? That's for you to decide. What history owes us. Here's what bothers me about the classified files. It's not that the Indian government is hiding Bose's collaboration with the Axis. That's documented. He met with Hitler, he worked with the Japanese. We know this. What they're hiding is what happened after, how he died, or didn't. Whether he was captured, imprisoned, tortured, forgotten. Whether the Indian government knew and did nothing. Whether they could have saved him and chose not to. Because if Bose survived 1945, if he was imprisoned by the Soviets or the British or anyone else, and independent India knew about it and didn't try to rescue him, that's a betrayal, not of his methods, but of the man himself. And if that's in the files, India's government doesn't want to admit it, because it would mean they used him, turned him into a symbol, built statues and named streets after him. But when he needed them, when he was alive and suffering somewhere, they did nothing. That's the cynicism at the heart of nation building. You honor your martyrs only after they are safely dead. While they're alive and complicated and inconvenient, you let them disappear. But here's the thing. History isn't owned by governments. It's owned by everyone. The truth belongs to the people who lived it, not the state that inherited it. And 80 years is long enough. Release the files. Let people decide for themselves whether Bose was a hero, a traitor, or something more complicated than either. Let's go back to where we started, lines across Asia. Subhas Chandra Bose's journey was India to Afghanistan, to Russia, to Germany, to Atlantic Ocean, to Cape of Good Hope, to Indian Ocean, to Singapore, to Burma, to India, to Saigon, to Taiwan. Think about that. He crossed 3 continents. He traveled by train, car, foot, submarine, airplane. He lived in 6 countries. He commanded troops in 3. His story connects India and Germany and Japan and Britain and Russia and all of Southeast Asia. It shows how World War II wasn't just a European war. It was a global war that reshaped Asia forever. And it shows something else, how far someone will go when they believe the cause is bigger than the cost. Bose gave up everything: comfort, safety, family, reputation, moral certainty. He allied with monsters because he believed defeating the British Empire was worth it. Was he right? Was it worth it? India is free now. British colonialism ended. The empire collapsed. Indians governed themselves. But was that because of Bose, or despite him, or unrelated to him entirely? We don't know, because the files are classified. So what's Bose's legacy in modern India? Walk through any major Indian city, Delhi, Kolkata, Mumbai, Chennai, and you'll see him. Statues, street names, airports named after him, his face on posters. January 23rd is Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose Jayanti, his birthday, a national holiday in several Indian states. School textbooks mention him, but carefully. They emphasize his patriotism, his courage, his sacrifice. They mention the INA. They mention, "Give me blood and I will give you freedom." They don't mention the meetings with Hitler. They don't mention Himmler. They don't linger on the Japanese alliance. They don't discuss what the INA did in Burma, or who paid for it, or what was promised in return. They teach the symbol, not the man. And maybe that's fine. Maybe that's how national heroes work. You simplify them. You turn them into myths. You let them represent ideals instead of uncomfortable realities. But when you do that, you lose something. You lose the truth. You lose the complexity. You lose the actual person. And maybe that's why the files stay classified, because the truth is always more complicated than the myth, and governments prefer myths. The final question. Here's what I keep thinking about. Can you honour someone's cause while rejecting their methods? Can you say, Bose was wrong to ally with the Nazis, but right to fight for Indian independence? Or does the method contaminate the cause? If you win freedom through collaboration with genocidal regimes, is it still freedom, or is it something else? And who gets to decide? The people who lived through it? The people who inherited it? The government that controls the narrative? Bose drew lines across Asia trying to answer one question. How do you free an oppressed people? And he decided, any way you can, whatever it takes, ally with anyone, do anything. The end justifies the means. India is free now. The British left. The empire ended. But the question remains, at what cost, and who paid it? Subhas Chandra Bose's body, or ashes, or whatever remains, sits in a temple in Tokyo, or doesn't, depending on whether you believe the official story. His files sit in a government archive in Delhi, classified, redacted, hidden. And his legacy sits in the space between hero and traitor, waiting for someone to finally tell the truth. 80 years is long enough. Release the files. Let history belong to everyone. This is Lines Across Asia.